Will you go out with me? The alien's response was beyond shocking. If Ben Carraway had been given even the faintest warning that today, of all the mundane, undercaffeinated spreadsheet, choked days he'd accidentally proposed to an alien, he might have brushed his teeth more thoroughly, maybe put on the clean uniform shirt instead of the one with the synth coffee stain that looked suspiciously like a screaming mongoose. But no fate didn't announce itself, it simply rolled its invisible eyes, chuckled to itself, and shoved him gently toward destiny, right into the maintenance corridor, where Kalia stood recalibrating a photon inverter like it owed her money. Kalia didn't look up when he entered, she rarely did, not out of arrogance. If anything, the Valari technician was the quietest, most polite. Being on the call Alexis, she just didn't respond to people, not much anyway. She worked with the precision of a cold, sculpted AI, fingers dancing over illuminated control pads, her long ears twitching now and then like antenna scanning for cosmic gossip. Ben holding a diagnostic tablet he didn't know how to use and a sandwich he definitely intended to eat while hiding from his supervisor hesitated in the doorway, his brain sensing the threat of actual responsibility, did what it always did. Pivoted hard into sarcasm. Hey Kalia, he said with a crooked smile, you ever consider dating a wildly mediocre human with commitment issues and a killer grilled cheese recipe? It wasn't meant to land, it was a joke, a harmless jab into the void. Ben said these things all the time to the AI that managed waste disposal, to the suspiciously smug plants in hydroponics, to himself in the mirror while brushing teeth with a sonic wand set permanently to me. But this time the void jabbed back. Kalia's fingers paused, she tilted her head slowly as though consulting an internal star map, and finally looked at him. Her eyes shimmered with the same quiet starlight that filled the galaxy outside the ship's hull, silver rimmed with violet, unfathomably still. By your customs or mine? She asked. Ben blinked. Somewhere deep inside his soul, a tiny internal narrator tripped over its own exposition. Sorry. What your question? She replied, voice calm as lunar ice. Should I respond by the customs of your people or mine? Ben opened his mouth, closed it, then opened it again, this time producing a strange noise that sounded like a constipated engine trying to reboot. Was she serious? Was this some kind of Ari joke? Was she wired to detect sarcasm and detonate it in the most socially catastrophic way possible? He stammered, clutching his sandwich like a talisman. Honestly, I was just kidding. You know, classic human mating humor. We tell jokes when we're nervous or trying to avoid doing real work or eating lukewarm food in utility closets. Kalia blinked, not slowly, not dramatically, just once, with a hint of consideration that his unfortunate I had begun to prepare my answer. Ben forced a laugh, the kind that dribbles out and immediately trips over its own shoelaces. Well, you know, don't let me stop you, I won't, she said, then turned back to her work as if nothing had happened. He left the corridor in a daze, abandoning his sandwich somewhere near an open coolant panel. His head swam with questions. Was that flirtation? Was she messing with him? Could Val Ari even mess? He didn't know. No one really knew. Kalia had been on the ship for 7 months and had spoken maybe 12 full sentences to anyone ever. By the time Ben made it back to the crew lounge, he was already regretting every life choice that led him here, including majoring in interstellar relations, mostly because the pamphlet had cool pictures of aliens wearing capes. Lieutenant Orla, the ship's pilot and recreational gossip sponge, looked up from her game of nebula poker and raised a brow. You look like someone just offered you a lifetime subscription to mandatory cardio. Ben collapsed onto the seat next to her. Kalia just asked me if I wanted to date her according to human customs or hers. 3 seconds of silence passed, then the entire table erupted in laughter. She what, or Louiseed? Oh my stars, did you finally snap, Carraway? Because if so, I want to record the meltdown for posterity. I'm telling you, Ben insisted, waving his arms. She didn't laugh, she just stared at me like I'd offered her a tax treaty with full seriousness. Val Ari don't do jokes, Ben, said Drax, the ship's communications officer. They do psionic rituals and ancestral memory dances. You probably just triggered a marriage ceremony. Probably. What the hell do you mean, probably? You joke, or said, leaning in, but if she meant it, if she really asked you that, then you're in deep. Valari bonding isn't casual, it's like neural fusion. One Ceremony and Boom shared thoughts, shared memories, and apparently a mutual craving. For spicy root paste, Ben stared at the ceiling I was just trying to avoid. Checking reactor logs. Well, Drax said, finishing his drink on the bright side. Maybe when you're mind-linked, she can help you remember your login password, Ben groaned. Somewhere in the ship's quiet underdeck, Kylia stood alone, finishing her calibration. She touched her fingers briefly to the edge of her long ear, an unconscious gesture of thoughtfulness, then quietly she whispered to herself in her own language one soft phrase that meant he was not joking, he just didn't know it yet. Ben Carraway was not built for mysteries. He preferred problems that came with labeled buttons, sarcastic instructions, and the occasional do not touch sticker, which he would then ignore, photograph, and post anonymously on the crew bulletin board under the name Reactor Boy 5000, so naturally waking up to a blinking notification on his tablet labeled Prion orientation required did not sit well with him. What in the freeze-dried hell is a Prion? He muttered, still wrapped in a thermal blanket and debating whether he had the strength to pretend this was a dream. Unfortunately, the ship's AI Lux was not the sympathetic type. Good morning, Mr. Carraway, Lux purred in its usual disembodied cheer. You have been scheduled for cultural orientation and neural suitability analysis as a prospective bond hopeful with Valari. Citizen Kalia of the clan Niche. Ben sat up fast enough to sprain something existential. Wait, hold up, no, I was just flirting. It was a joke. There were no contracts, no mutual declarations. I wasn't even wearing proper pants. There was a brief pause, as if Lux was considering whether pants were legally necessary. Valari customs differ from human conventions under Section 12. Article 9 of the Intercultural Cohabitation Accord's intent may be inferred through gesture, inquiry, or metaphor. In this case, your statement, hey Kalia, you ever considered dating wildly mediocre human, has been formally logged as a courtship initiation. Ben buried his face in the blanket. I'm going to die in a puff of paperwork. Would you like me to notify your next of kin? That was sarcasm. Lux I'm learning. 2 hours later, Ben stood in one of the ship's auxiliary hollow decks, facing a floating educational module shaped like a glowing cube with legs. The Valari courtship simulation advisor. I am your guide, it chirped in a voice that sounded eerily like an overenthusiastic turbot. Welcome, bond hopeful, please prepare your mind for absorption of Phase 1, understanding the Valari soul knot. Ben groaned. This better not involve incense or chanting or like Knives. Phase 1 did in fact involve all three. The cube projected images of twin stars twirling around each other in tight gravity, dances luminous threads of energy weaving between distant minds. It showed ancient Valari couples joining thoughts in floating crystal caverns while telepathic wails sang above it. Showed bonding daggers, ceremonial of course, being held during psionic rites to symbolize trust, vulnerability, and not stabbing each other. As Ben absorbed all this, the cube's legs clattered as it danced around him. The ritual is both intimate and metaphysical once joined. Two minds may share surface thoughts, emotional frequencies, and preferred breakfast textures. Oh good, Ben said. Because I've always wanted someone to know how much I overthink cereal choices. Phase 2 didn't go any smoother. It was a compatibility test where Ben had to mentally respond to a series of abstract images while a softly glowing crystal orb read his neural pulses. First image, burning planet. Ben's reaction, I should call my landlord's. Second image, 2 intertwined trees. Ben's thought, is this a metaphor or a home decor suggestion? Third image, Kalia's face. That one hit differently. She wasn't smiling, of course. She rarely did, but in the projection her expression was open, curious. There was a softness in the eyes he hadn't noticed before, a flicker of emotion just beneath the starlight surface. He stared longer than he meant to, and the orb pulsed bright blue. Compatible, it in one. Ben backed away. Compatible with what? I'm barely compatible with myself. Later that day, Kalia found him on the outer deck where Earth gravity was simulated and stars stretched like spilled silver ink. Across the black she approached silently as always and sat beside him. The silence between them was so thick and comfortable it almost counted as a conversation. I went to your courtship class today, Ben said finally. I know, she replied. He glanced sideways. You do? She gave a small nod. Your neural signature flared twice, once at the Depiction of the soul not once at my image. Ben shifted, suddenly fascinated by a loose shoelace on his uniform boot. Yeah, well, the soul not looked at Tangly. She didn't laugh, but her eyes shimmered with amusement. You find this amusing, he asked. Not the ritual, your discomfort. Oh great, so this is all a cosmic prank on the guy who once ate a space chili pepper on a dare and hallucinated he was a comet. Kalia tilted her head. I do not prank, I selected you. The words hit him like a rogue gravity field. You what I assessed your traits: humor, adaptability, curiosity, a rare tolerance for entropy. These are strengths among my people. Ben stared slack-jawed. You assess me like a job interview. I am Valerie, she said calmly. We do not waste time with illusions of randomness. Ben leaned back against the railing, trying to catch up with a galaxy that no longer spun on any axis he recognized, but somehow in all the surreal layers of it, the courtship class, the glowing orb, the soul knots, he found he wasn't as panicked as he expected to be. In fact, he was intrigued. Okay, he said eventually, if we're doing this your customs or mine? Kalia looked at him, long ears twitching slightly. Yours involve shared meals and awkward confessions. Yes, mostly breadsticks, and panic sometimes. Karaoke, then I would like to try karaoke. Ben blinked. You what? She stood, prepare the loud room, and with that she walked away, long coat catching the artificial breeze, leaving Ben staring at the stars and wondering how exactly he went from sarcastic loner to potential interspecies soulmate in under a week. At least he still had time to practice his song, something tasteful, something classic, something without too many high notes. Ben Caraway stood in front of the karaoke machine like it was a weaponized artifact from a forgotten war. The mic trembled slightly in his hand, not from fear, he insisted, but from the inconsistent feedback loop that made it sound like a dying wail every third syllable across the rec deck. Kalia sat with her back perfectly straight, eyes fixed on him in patient silence, her expression somewhere between curiosity and the intense focus of someone preparing to defuse a bomb with their mind. The rec deck was unusually full. For a Thursday, cycle word had spread fast, not just about the karaoke session, but about who had requested it. Kelia had apparently become a kind of low-level myth aboard the Kalalexis, known for her silent strolls through engineering, her precision repair work, and as of last week, the terrifying possibility that she might be emotionally interested in someone, that someone being Ben, who once got his hand stuck in a food replicator trying to improve taco velocity. He glanced at Orla near the snack station, who gave him 2 thumbs up and mouthed, "Don't screw this up, you legend." Drax, seated beside her, had already started recording on a handheld holo cam. Ben sighed, then tapped the control panel. The opening notes of an old Earth classic drifted through the air, and the display flashed the first line, "I've had the time of my life." The audience, which now included half the ship's operations team and a few curious aliens from maintenance, lined in, and then Ben began to sing. It wasn't good, not even close. He hit maybe 4 notes correctly, and one of them was probably by accident, but he sang with conviction, eyes locked on Kalia, trying to channel every awkward, sincere molecule of his very human self. The rec deck's ambient lighting flickered once in protest, and a small ventilation fan began making a sound like it was crying, but no one interrupted. And when it ended, when the final off-key note drifted into the recycled air, and Ben lowered the mic like a spent laser pistol, Kelia stood up, not clapped, stood. She walked slowly toward him, her long coat brushing the floor, the faint shimmer of her skin catching the light impulses. When she reached him, she placed 2 fingers on his temple, Valari for witness, and said softly, "Your vocal harmonics were catastrophic, but your intent was precise." Ben blinked. "That's actually the nicest thing anyone's ever said about my singing." Her ears twitched once in amusement. "You are now considered verified for trial assembly." "Wait, what?" Kalia turned to the gathered crowd. "Ben Caraway has successfully completed phase 1 of the initiation path. We will now proceed to formal evaluation by my kin. The bond trial is active." The room fell silent. Even the karaoke machine beeped quietly and turned itself off, as if sensing it had just become irrelevant. Later that night, after most of the crew had dispersed, some still whispering bond trial like it was a new intergalactic reality show, Ben found himself in the ship's garden chamber, staring at a glowing fruit and wondering whether it Was edible or a decorative alien egg. Kelia joined him without announcement, her movements as fluid as ever. So this trial thing, he began picking the fruit and spinning it in his hands like a nervous magician. Does it involve more singing? Because I think I've exhausted my vocal war crimes. Quota no singing. Kalia said, just observation and assessment. My kin must determine whether you are suitable not only for me but for the shared consciousness we would enter. Ben whistled, and here I thought Earth dating apps were brutal. Kalia looked at him for a long moment. Do you find this terrifying? He hesitated. Honestly, yeah. Kind of. I mean, I've failed to commit to choosing a toothpaste brand for the past 3 years, and now I'm being evaluated for psychic entanglement by a group of Batley-hardened aliens with glowing bones. They do not glow. Oh, okay, my bad. That somehow makes me feel exactly 0% better. Kelia gave what might have been the faintest hint of a smile, an expression so subtle it barely bent her mouth, but made the stars in her eyes twinkle ever so slightly. You're honest, that will help. Ben sat down on a synthetic stone bench and tossed the fruit aside. So when do they arrive? They are already en route. Their vessel will dock at 400 tomorrow's cycle. You will be expected in ceremonial wear. Please tell me that's not the robe with all the tassels. It is exactly the robe with all the tassels. Ben groaned. Perfect. I always wanted to look like a haunted lampshade. Kalia didn't reply. She just sat beside him, silent as ever, but this time Ben noticed that her silence wasn't the kind that pushes people away. It was the kind that makes space for something, for thoughts to land, for tension to unravel. He cleared his throat. You know, back on Earth, when someone likes someone else, we usually go out for a drink, share some deep secrets, maybe lie about how often we exercise. Kalia tilted her head. We are not on Earth. Yeah, Ben said, smiling faintly, and weirdly. I don't mind. They sat together for a long time, two figures beneath artificial starlight, bonded not yet by psionic threads or ancestral rites, but by the simple gravity of something new, something uncertain, something alive. At precisely 400 the next cycle, the Tashinva of Valerie warship, shaped like a curved blade of dusk light, blinked into orbit beside the Calalexis. In its wake came questions, protocol, and a dozen glowing eyes fixed on the human who had dared to ask the quiet alien technician out on a date. And Kyle's kin were not known for mercy, but they were known for their karaoke. The Tishanva did not dock so much as arrive, like a solemn declaration of war. Its silver-black hull shimmered with defensive plasma veils, and its landing thrusters whispered rather than roared, as if to say, we don't need noise to remind you we're important. It hovered briefly over docking bay 3, then folded its wings inward like a mechanical bird of prey and locked into place with a purr of magnetic clamps. Ben watched from the viewing gallery, sipping something Lux had informed him was nutritionally calming. It tasted like lavender and bad decisions. Friendly-looking ship, he muttered, very knife adjacent. Orla, standing beside him with a protein bar in one hand and mild concern in the other, gave him a onsova. So you ready to meet her warbound kin? Nope, Ben replied, but I'm wearing the robe, so legally I think that counts as emotional consent. The robe in question was a flowing Valerie ceremonial garment, deep indigo with layered tassels, radiant trim, and a chest emblem that roughly translated to one who has invited complications. He had tried to wear it with pride. It came out more like mild confusion and fabric anxiety. As the airlock cycled open, a low chime echoed through the bay. From the mist-steeped threshold stepped 3 figures. The first was a towering Velari elder whose long white hair was braided with metallic threads that caught the light like stardust. She wore no armor, but her presence suggested she didn't need it. The second was a middle-aged warrior with a scar down one long ear and a gaze that could file paperwork just by glaring at it. The third, somehow worse, was a younger Val Ari with several decorative medals, a ceremonial staff, and the unmistakable smugness of someone who'd already judged Ben and found him lacking. Kelia stepped forward from the receiving group, bowed once in the Valari fashion, and introduced Ben with quiet formality. This is Ben Caraway. He initiated contact accidentally, Ben added, then immediately regretted it. The elder approached him, slowly studying him as one might examine a puzzling but ultimately harmless pet. Her voice, when it came, was like moonlight on metal. You requested union with Kaya Nish. Ben opened his mouth, then closed it, then opened it again. Ah yes, but it was sort of a joke, and then she said something very serious, and now there's a robe and... I've already been through a karaoke trial. Silence, the younger warrior snapped. Let the elder observe. Ben shut up so fast he bit his tongue. The elder extended a hand and pressed 2 fingers to his forehead. A low vibration hummed through him, not painful, just revealing. Images flashed behind his eyelids. His childhood home, the first time he touched a starside panel the way Kylia had looked at him after his karaoke disaster, like she saw something worth listening to. Then came doubt, fear, the smell of burnt toast during a failed breakfast experiment, his dreams of escaping gravity, and his quiet belief that no one would ever look at him the way she had when the elder stepped back. Her face was unreadable. He is chaotic, that's very fair, Ben said, but sincere, that's surprisingly fair. The scarred warrior circled him once, muttering something in Valerie. Kelia responded calmly, and from the cadence Ben picked up the word unorthodox at least twice. Finally, the smug one stepped forward. We require the Selnari mirror, he said with far too much relish. Let us see what you truly are. Ben frown sounds ominous. It is, the smug one said, smiling faintly and extremely uncomfortable. The Selnari mirror turned out to be a chamber constructed from psionic crystal grown into curved walls that shimmered like fog in moonlight. It didn't reflect light, it reflected self. Not just your image, but your worst thoughts, your quiet truths, the things you avoided on purpose and called it self-care. You will enter alone, Kylie explained softly. Just outside the chamber doors your essence will be revealed. They will watch. Great, Ben said, wiping his palms on the ceremonial robe. Because I always wanted to star in my own psychic horror film. Kelia placed a hand on his arm. Be honest, that is all. Inside the chamber, Ben felt like he was falling and floating. All at once, a version of himself appeared, sharper jawline, better posture, but the same weary eyes. You're joking your way into something you're not ready for, it said. Gee, thanks, Ben replied. Anything else you want to ruin breakfast cereal? The Empire strikes back. You're afraid she'll regret choosing you. Ben didn't respond. You think you're not built for something that lasts, that you're too unstable, too distracted, too human. The crystal around him pulsed, then dimmed. He stood alone for a long time. Then Kalia's image appeared, just her face calm and glowing faintly. No judgment, just waiting. Ben exhaled. I'm scared, but I want this, not just the ceremony. You, even if I don't understand it all yet. The chamber quieted, then the door slid open. Outside, the Valari elder stood still as stone. Kalia's eyes met his. He passed the elder, said. The smug warrior looked like someone had told him. The universe ran on slapstick. Later that evening, back in the crew lounge, Ben sat beside Kalia, both sipping something fizzy and vaguely citrus from sleek glass tubes. So, he said, was the Selnari mirror supposed to make me relive my high school talent show failure? No, she said, sipping calmly. That was likely a bonus. Ben grinned. You chose me on purpose, even with all the chaos. She tilted her head. Your chaos has shape and taste. Ben raised an eyebrow. Did you just call me flavored? Confusion. Kalia nodded, utterly serious. Cinnamon. He laughed so hard he nearly choked on his drink. Tomorrow the bonding ceremony awaited. Tonight they simply sat together, flavored confusion and starlit calm. Ben Caraway stood in the ceremonial chamber, wearing the robe again, the infamous robe, indigo silk with golden filigree tassels on tassels, and a symbol on the chest that now pulsed gently in sync with his heartbeat. It didn't feel like a haunted lampshade anymore. It felt earned, or at the very least survived. The chamber had been transformed. Gone were the metallic bulkheads and maintenance conduits of the Kalias. In their place, projected by layers of Velari crystalline matrices, bloomed a simulated night sky from Kelia's home world. Twin moons hovered low on the horizon, one coral pink, the other a dark blue streak with stars. The ground beneath their feet appeared soft, mossy, and faintly luminescent, like walking on a dream above them. Constellations danced, each one aligned to a name from Kelia's lineage. And now, if this all went as planned, Ben, he fidgeted with the sash across the chamber. Kalia stood in her own ceremonial garb, flowing silver lines etched into dark fabric. Her long ears adorned with subtle bands of psionic metal. She looked at him, her expression unreadable but not cold, measured, present. Radiant. Lux's voice chimed softly overhead. All systems stable, no psionic interference detected. Ceremony may proceed. The Valari elders stood at the Chambers edged like pillars of starlight. The smug one was still present, but had apparently accepted defeat with the grace of someone who'd accidentally bet against gravity. Even he stood silent now. Hands folded, Ben exhaled slowly. This was it, no test, no simulation, just choice. Kalia stepped forward first, as custom dictated. She raised a crystal filament no thicker than a hair and held it. Between them, the filament sparked with neural energy visible only in the psionic spectrum, a line waiting to become a bond. Ben reached out, their fingers touched the filament at the same time it shimmered and pulsed. He didn't know what he expected, a blinding flash, a symphony, maybe a memory dump where he relived her most traumatic childhood snack, but the reality was subtler. Quieter, a sense of presence pressed into his thoughts, not invasive, more like a second heartbeat inside his mind, steady and observing his own emotions. Were there two flitting like birds across a shared sky, and then slowly Kella's. He felt her curiosity first, like warm starlight, then the still ache of loneliness, older than any of her years, aboard the Callias. Beneath that, a solid core of discipline, iron forged by choice. She had chosen to be quiet, to protect herself, to wait for something real. Then she saw him through her mind. Ben saw himself not as a joke machine or accidental romantic, but as someone interesting, unpredictable, yes, messy. Absolutely, but alive, open, sincere. He didn't see chaos reflected in her thoughts. He saw a kind of rhythm she hadn't known she'd needed, and then, as if confirming the bond, her voice spoke inside his head, not as a whisper but as an understanding. You never asked why I answered your joke. He thought back to that moment in the maintenance corridor, the awkward laugh, the sandwich, the way the universe had shifted slightly, like it had nudged them both towards something unexpected. I figured you just liked grilled cheese, he thought back, that earned something rare, a ripple of amusement across their link, faint but bright. The filament fused, the bond completed, a quiet pulse of energy expanded from them, touching each elder in turn, then fading into the chamber like a sigh. The sky projection overhead shimmered, and a new star appeared in the constellation, not a large one but distinct, anchored. The ceremony ended not with fanfare but with stillness. Later, when the holographic moons had dimmed and the elders had departed, some respectfully, one reluctantly, Ben and Kalia stood alone in the quiet. So, he said aloud, now breaking the silence gently, does this mean we're officially dating? Kalia tilted her head. Valari, do not use that term, right? You prefer interwoven consciousnesses with shared memory substrate. Much snappier. She gave him a look. You're adapting, don't let it get to your head. I still think your ceremonial soup tastes like boiled shoelaces. Your taste is flawed. Ben grinned. Yeah, but you bonded with it. They walked side by side back to the corridor, robes trailing behind like comet tailies. The ship returned to normal rhythms. Lux resumed its announcements. Drax uploaded a karaoke compilation titled Ballads and bonding. Orla claimed 10 credits from the captain, muttering something about never doubting chaotic romance again. And Ben, well, Ben changed, not dramatically. He still made jokes at inappropriate times, still had a complicated relationship with paperwork, and absolutely no idea what half his console buttons did. But now, when he wandered into engineering and found Kalia working silently at a console, he didn't feel like a trespasser in a world he didn't understand. He felt invited. She'd reach for a tool, he'd pass it to her without a word. She'd glance at him, and the thought would pass between them like music. You are learning, so are you. And in those quiet spaces between stars, between thoughts, between one species and another, something truly rare had formed. Not just a bond, not just love, but understanding. An accident perhaps, but then again maybe the best things always. The end.